Beware of fragments of silicon in the path.
All right, welcome to a new installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me as always are my colleagues, Galix and Petty Fan. And let us get to the news. Let me see here. Galix, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, I'm feeling much better than I was last week, although I still have a bit of a lingering cough. And I'm still working from home this week out of an abundance of caution, because I believe we do have someone who's a little bit weakened immune system in the office, at least sometimes, so. But hopefully next week I'll be doing well enough to go back, or I'll be able to work in the office again. So that's good. Let's see. Otherwise, it's been pretty low-key, I think, which I'm sure has nothing to do with the fact that I haven't been getting out of the house all that much due to not going to work. Let's see, Horoboro's big run hadn't happened yet last time, I think, so yeah, that was interesting. In Splatoon 3, the map, because that's doing Salmon Run on the normal versus mode maps, and it was a bit of a rough fit this time. No matter where you went, it seemed like the enemies could spawn right up on you pretty quickly.
Fun.
And that made it hard. But I was able to get a good team, and I managed to qualify for a bronze statue reward, so I'm satisfied with that. And I think that's probably about it. Me and Mac continued to do Langrisser. We actually managed to start early this past weekend, which was good, and hopefully we can start reasonably on time this weekend.
Anything else?
I think that's all.
All right then. Well, Petty, it's your go.
Overall, fairly a quiet week this week. Though Monday I got my first, I think it's like a steroid injection or something in my knee to hopefully, help it not hurt so much. They also ended up doing an x-ray because I fell a few weeks ago and they wanted to make sure I didn't, fracture anything because that would be bad.
Yes.
Yes, stop doing that.
I'd love to. I don't get my new braces till next week. But yeah, nothing's broken, though I still have the pretty, substantial arthritis. You know it's bad when they can see it on an x-ray. And yeah, just been kind of, I guess right now my knee doesn't really hurt as much as usual. It just kind of feels weird. Like, I don't know if it's just the like gel and steroid stuff in the injection, separating my knee enough so it's not rubbing on itself anymore. So I guess we'll see how it goes after the next one. And as far as gaming goes, I've actually dropped Atomic Heart because, oh my god, it got so boring. So I guess, good thing I'm on Game Pass, so I can just drop games easily. And I ended up starting Death Stranding because it just came on Game Pass, so why not? So yeah, it's definitely been a Hideo Kojima game. um, and yeah, I think that's mostly it from me.
All right. Well, I guess it's my go in terms of news. Yeah. Like, fortunately, yeah, this weekend was pretty newsworthy. As I had to go to the ER a couple of times. Had to deal with, let's say, some bad constipation and some other things that I don't really want to talk about here and now because it wasn't fun or pleasant or the topic of polite conversation, let's say.
Understandable.
Yeah. Maybe on MSP. Like, but I'm doing better now. Like, did end up having an X-ray and a CAT scan. Thankfully, no major problems, just kind of a buildup of blockage, which was taken care of. Let's say. They also ended up having to cancel my appointment with the hand doctor because I have to do a follow up, a 2-part follow up because they said I follow up with a GI gastrointestinal doctor, but in order to do that, I have to go to the primary care first. That's next week, so that's the whole thing. And
Ain't insurance grand sometimes?
yes, it allows me to like the emergency room visits are only $75 a pop versus the literal hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars it would be otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I think the X-ray and the CAT scan, since those were inpatient, those are covered by my insurance fully. If they were outpatient, I'd have to. There would be a copay on that. Like, that's what I'm remembering. I guess I'll find out soon enough. Maybe not soon. Honestly, hospital bills take a while.
Yeah, they do.
Let's see. Still haven't gotten the one from January yet. Like with the finger infection. But it's like if I do need to go to the hand doctor, I'm going to have to get the insurance reauthorization because the window has now closed. But there are twice now I had to prioritize other things. Goes. I mean, my hands seem to be doing well enough, even with the pain flourishes. Plus the it's been feeling pain like through the arms and the legs, and I don't know. Like, I might need to go to a neurologist. But anyway, like in gaming news, I dropped Mirror's Edge mainly because I hit a part where the frame rate just started to go into slideshow mode, and I couldn't tell you why.
I think it's because it doesn't like Intel graphics. That's always been a problem with like mid to late 2000s EA games.
And it could be any number of things. I just know it got unplayable. I'm just like, well, I'm done with this. So I've switched over to Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2. Which is
now with twice as many party members.
Yes. I did look that up. But unlike Blaster Master Zero 2, I don't hate it. In terms of like create sequels. In
Now,
fact,
is
it's
that like
actually
the 8-bit styled ones?
Blaster Master. Yeah, that's the 8-bit ones in the
Yeah.
style of Castlevania 3.
Because know the regular, I guess, Bloodstained is more like Symphony of the Night, only 3D graphics.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. Though Curse of the Moon 2 will come up in the topic of discussion.
Yeah, Curse of the Moon 2 is a classic Vania like that new one that Inter Creates just did.
Right.
That's in the frickin' Galgun universe for a reason.
Now, presumably because it's Galgun.
Yeah, probably that.
Like,
No, I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just
Mm.
I'm not sure their thought. Well, I guess most of their stuff is Galgun adjacent, isn't it?
or Azure Striker Gunvolt.
Gunvolt is related to Galgun now.
Oh,
Copen's family is related to one of the main families, I think.
you know way too much about this. Anyway, so that's my news for the week. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week are Stephen Frost, Jeremy Williams, and Dave Rees of Digital Eclipse.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So, how you all doing tonight?
Great.
I mean, it's a Wednesday, right? So it's not that bad. The week's almost over.
We're well past it now, but I just want to compliment you guys on your intro music. That was really rocking, and I wanted to know where you found that track.
We had somebody commission it for us.
That's rad. You have your own music. That's cool.
Yeah. Done, geez, how many years ago? Yeah.
I would literally have to go find the music file and see the create date.
Well, here's the thing.
So
that wouldn't even be the... Well, I suppose for that version, that would be correct. But the music predate, like, goes all the way back to, before the show started.
Yeah,
but
well, back in the day, it was done live, so...
Yeah, and the person who played it live gave us a recorded version of that and our ending music. But anyway,
Gotcha.
Before we get into things properly, we've got Stephen. You've got a few work colleagues here with you tonight. Jeremy and Dave, can you introduce yourselves to the audience?
Sure. Hi, audience. I'm Jeremy, and I'm an engineer here at Digital Eclipse. I've worked on a few titles, most recently, obviously, being Atari 50, the anniversary celebration, but I also worked with Dave on Space Jam, the New Legacy, the game? A New Legacy, the game.
A New Legacy, the game.
Sorry. It's just one of like the many legacies. And we had a great time doing that for Xbox and some other unannounced titles. And yeah, that's it. I'm an engineer.
We worked on Blizzard Arcade.
Yeah, there you go.
You guys helped on the Blizzard Arcade Collection. That's right.
Yeah, that was our first project with Digital Eclipse.
Yep. So if you ever had any problems with the 4-player in the Rock and Roll Racing, that's all on us.
Or the map system in what's it called?
Blackthorn.
Blackthorn. Yep.
Yeah. But I'm Dave. I'm also a software engineer at Digital Eclipse. Yeah, and Jeremy basically laid it out. I worked on Atari 50 as well, and Blizzard Arcade Collection, and All-Star, or the Space Jam game. So, and working on a bunch of new stuff now. Very excited about what's coming up. But here to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about.
Right. Well, we'll get into Atari 50 in a little bit, but we do have a bit of late-breaking news in terms of Digital Eclipse releases, in that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection is getting updates in a little bit of time, which will add online support to the NES Classic. most importantly, the Manhattan Project. And so, can any of you tell us about what's going on here?
Well, it'll just be me. Those guys, while I would have loved to have them on there, didn't really work on Cowabunga Collection. They were busy with other stuff. But
Hey, I did the black and white shader. I
Oh,
didn't get any
that's
credit.
right. That's right. Sorry,
All right,
I
that's
forgot
all right.
about that. He did contribute.
I took a look at the code.
It's all a blur. Everyone works on everything. I always try to bring these two guys into everything because I love them so much and they work so well together. But they're great. Not only are they great engineers, but they're just great. Have an eye for games and design and things like that. But in relation to the Cowabunga collection, yeah, I mean, we had talked about this last year. I think, or it all blurs together now. Maybe December or January. When we announced the initial content update for the collection, that took, we added some post-launch support. We added some new features. It was a laundry list of updates and fixes and enhancements that we did. But primarily, it was to add online support to one of the other games that was in the collection. And at that time, we had also mentioned that we were going to continue to add online support to other games. And the most recent one here that we have announced and are about to talk more about in the coming weeks is the Manhattan Project. So yeah, glad to take that game online. We had a lot of fans and consumers out there who love that game and wanted to be able to play it online with their friends and family and things like that. And so we wanted to kind of deliver on that for them and include that. And while this update won't be as huge as the last update that we did as far as features and additions and stuff like that, there are a little bit of new additions to it outside of the online addition to Manhattan Project that we'll talk about in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that.
So is the goal to have every multiplayer Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game eventually playable online?
No, I think this is. I mean, unless I will say, never say never. There isn't a finite situation where we're not doing any more. But right now, as of right now, today, this will be the last sort of update for the game. Working with Konami and the support, we never expected to end up adding all this additional content and online games post-launch when we were launching the game. If you would have asked me then, I would have said yeah, no, we're sort of done. We'll do probably a post-launch patch to fix any remaining bugs, but we're done. But the reception to the collection was so overwhelming that Konami really wanted to go back and really reward the audience with additional content, free editions, more enhancements for the games, more museum content, all that stuff, just to kind of show the appreciation for the support that the fan base has been giving. And so that's where this last sort of update comes from as well, from that similar kind of thought process, is just, to thank fans for all their support, for the sales and also the reviews and just for all the positive comments and stuff like that. And we really wanted to show our appreciation by adding more features and games online. So that's what we want to do, and that's what we did.
Well, it's really good that you were able to do that then. Especially considering that there was quite a bit of wailing and gnashing of teeth that some of the games weren't online in terms of the multiplayer.
Yeah, and yeah, there was that initial discussion. That was part of it. We made, I wouldn't have changed that, but we had a limited number of games that we were going to take online for tournament for the Cowabunga collection at the beginning. We wanted to, and I've shared my sort of reasoning for why the 4 games were chosen. But I wouldn't have sort of changed that. Looking back, but we did see the desire to take additional games online, and the audience was just really vocal about it, and just consistently, and it was positive comments and positive way of sharing that desire to have these games and features online. And I think when consumers, and I just say this in general, when consumers approach companies like Konami, et cetera, and they aren't just yelling at them and saying like, you need to do this now, but are saying like, hey, love the collection, but it would be awesome if you could do A, B, and C. It makes companies a lot more receptive to those comments, and they actually genuinely will listen. And this is an example of that, right? This is the consumer saying like, we would love to have these things online. We love this collection. What would make it perfect is this. Please do this. And Konami's like, you know what? Let's do it. And we did. So there goes to show you that people do listen to consumers and the feedback, as long as it's sort of handled in a specific sort of way, and you can see positive action that comes out of that.
Indeed. I mean, who knew that yelling things at people doesn't, work out too well usually?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it never does really. And I have to give major props, and I've mentioned this before, but major props to the community, like especially the tournament fighter community, who not only were really supportive of the game, but presented to us. They actually made PowerPoint presentations about suggestions about things that we could add to the game to make it better, or to try to increase the sort of fan base and pool of players who play tournament fighters. And they did such a beautiful job. They actually did one slide for each sort of feature that they would have loved to add, and they presented it and they sent it to us. And there was a lot of thought that was put into that we really, really appreciated. And they even went to the point where like they were giving us like the memory addresses of stuff on the original games to allow certain features and options to be enabled. And we took that and we actually tried to implement some of that stuff. Like the sort of one example of that is in the Japanese version of Tournament Fighters, there is a unlockable, basically a tournament mode, kind of like a King of Fighters, a la where you form a team of tournament fighters and then you can play against each other. It was only available in the Japanese version of Tournament Fighters, but they actually showed us how we could unlock it and make it accessible as an enhancement. So we took that info and we did it. And so that's actually in the game right now. So again, just goes to show you that if you share your passion and you do it in a positive way, people will listen to you and they'll try to add stuff and implement stuff as best they can in order to, please that audience. So I want to say thank you to the Tournament Fighter audience and for the fan base there, and for all the wonderful comments and suggestions for the collection.
Indeed. Well, it seems to have worked out really well. Right then. So, as fun as it is to talk about the Cowabunga collection, we should press forward to Atari 50, which is the kind of the main focus of this interview. Now this is part 2. We did part 1 with Stephen not too long ago, where we kind of talked about like the classic Atari games, and that led to here where you got Jeremy and Dave, who I believe worked on some of the original titles that's contained in Atari 50.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, I worked on Vector Sector, and Dave worked on 2 of the games, Haunted Houses and Airworld, Sword Quest Airworld.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I suppose I'll start by asking, was it hard or was it relatively easy to convince Atari to, put original games in this package?
Oh, I mean, Stephen, that was a part of the discussion from the beginning, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, they were already in that mindset with their, recharge games. They've been thinking about that along the way. How do we take old properties and sort of modernize them and make them more accessible to the current Atari audience, while also not alienating the classic Atari audience. So I think even at the start of this project, there was that sort of glimmer of thought that we would try to do something. What that wasn't very clear cut yet, but we kind of let the engineers, Jason, Mike, Dave, Jeremy, kind of go off and kind of see what inspired them as far as their sort of background and history with Atari, and what sort of areas from the company or the games that were released really sparked their imagination and their interest. And what was great is that, or kind of organically, these guys kind of went off and did their own thing and started experimenting and working on stuff. Some of it, which before even Atari was kind of aware that we were experimenting with it, right? Like I said, there was discussions about possibly doing this, but nothing was concrete. We didn't know exactly what we were going to build yet. So I think what these guys created was amazingly awesome, and what was great about it is that since we had so many people kind of doing these new types of games, you get very diverse experiences, right? Jeremy, which you'll talk to, really loved sort of the vector-based kind of early arcade days of Atari, and that's what kind of inspired him to develop Vector Sector.
Right.
Yeah, just to expand on what Steven just said, though, for a minute, it was really cool of Atari to allow us that freedom because at no point did they tell us which games to make. It was very much as if we were in the 1970s and Nolan Bushnell just told his engineers to go make their game and come back and show it to me in a few months. That's exactly how it went down, just like the spirit of the original Atari. So we felt a huge sense of ownership over these games, and I think we put a lot more love into them because of that.
That's really good to hear. Especially since this could have been ruined by corporate mandates and all that.
Yeah, and I will say just in general, and I think I've said this before, that Atari was a phenomenal partner to be with. This is like a new generation of employees and team at Atari, and they're not, while they respect the history of Atari, they're not beholden to any specific aspects of Atari history. So they just want to create the best possible products they can and expand, the fan base of Atari stuff. And so I think that's why I think we couldn't have been in a better sort of situation as far as our ability to not only kind of create what we wanted in these reimagined games, but also the ability to kind of explore and experiment to kind of create the timeline sort of concept that the whole celebration is based upon. Like I can imagine working with a larger, more established, more traditional kind of company. They would have probably had a different kind of expectation and been a little bit more rigid in what they expected to see. And so I think Atari's sort of flexibility and their desire to stand aside and let us do what we do best really empowered, like Jeremy was saying, everyone on the team, and especially the engineers who went off and made these new reimagined products. It gave them such a level of freedom and flexibility to create what they wanted to create.
Okay. Let me flip the script a bit here. And were there any parameters that Atari said were out of bounds?
No, not really. I mean, the only things that you could imagine were out of bounds are like legal rights, legal related issues, licensing situations and stuff like that. But they literally, more so than anyone, said like, hey, we trust you guys. You obviously know what you're doing. Go do it. And that's what the team did. And I think the quality of the product that came out of it speaks volumes to that fact. Sometimes when you're in situations where you're partnering with other folks, they can be their own worst enemy, or it's kind of like this back and forth between the dev team and the other side as far as like how things should be. But Atari has always been really, really receptive to what we wanted to do. And I can't think of any situation where we were like trying to do something and they said, yeah, no, you shouldn't do that. They were really open to all of our ideas and suggestions.
Yeah, as you can imagine, at Digital Eclipse, we have a lot of experience with looking at the legalities of various games and who owns certain rights and what it takes to get those cleared and approved. And so we know those minefields. And so when we looked at the properties that Atari owned, we wanted to make sure that the games that we were paying homage to were wholly owned by Atari and wouldn't be a problem. So, for instance, in Vector Sector, where you go down to the planet's surface, there are homages there to properties that Atari doesn't own anymore, but they are homages and they don't use any of the original assets and they don't look like the original games. But that was a line that we walked, and it was Atari was totally happy with it.
I would just like to mention Airworld, because I think that was something that we discussed internally originally, and just thought, wow, wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be amazing if we could, finish that series? Basically, a game that, it's been like 40 years, right, since they closed the doors on that game early and sort of just canceled the whole thing.
It's a world record, really, if we ever submit for it. It is technically a world record.
40-year delay.
Yeah, from the time of announcement to the time of release.
Yeah, but we, I think it was Mike Micah who brought up the idea, hey, maybe we could make it. And I thought it was crazy. I was like, would they go for that? And they absolutely did. I mean, we came up with the concepts, and once we showed it to them, they were fully on board.
Right. I suppose the most amazing thing would have been able to finish the contest, but that probably wasn't in the realms of reality. So.
Well, yeah, I will say that we did talk a lot, and Jared and Dave will contest this, to just ideas of what we could do to try to do a contest or some sort of public thing that was in the spirit of that. And we thought about is there something we can include in the game and things like that. But it just didn't pan out, and we didn't have time to do it. But there were discussions about what we could do that would be neat to kind of further celebrate this sort of fourth installment of Sword Quest, right? Unfortunately, nothing panned out.
At one point, we thought maybe we could create the 3D models for the remaining prizes, and supply a 3D printer blueprint that you could print them out at home. If you finish the game, you would get some sort of code that you could read and go online and print this thing out for yourself, that kind of thing. But yeah, it in the end, it didn't pan out.
I could see why that didn't pan out for a couple reasons, but that is unfortunate, since I know that jeweled sword is probably still on a mantelpiece to this day.
Yeah, who knows where that is?
Well, I mean that was one of the rumors. Like the sword ended up on Jack Tramiel's mantelpiece or something like that. It's a rumor. I would not read too much into it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that during development of Atari, we run across a lot of rumors, and I come to the conclusion that unless I actually see some credible sort of example of it or actually show it to me, then I don't believe. Because there's so many rumors and conjecture about even Atari as a company, but also its games and things like that, and games some games existing, some things like that, and it's like, well, if you haven't seen it up to this point, it probably is not real or doesn't exist,
Well, it's not a surprise that such urban myths arose, given that Atari was always a very chaotic company, but especially in 1983, 1984, because it's kind of busy falling apart. So, but anyway, in terms of Airworld, how close did you get this one to the other game?
The other game being which one?
Waterworld and Earthworld and.
Well, I think it's probably closest to Airworld, to be honest, because I played through all of them, and I felt that Earthworld was the most sort of complete game. And the sort of the concept that we came up with, where we had the I Ching grid, the 8x8 grid, it just made sense to have that simple kind of environment, and I wanted to keep the sort of navigation, the whole menu system, similar to the Earth Earthworld because it just felt better to me. So, and if you look at Earthworld, I mean, the other games, the main character isn't even colored, right? It's just a single color, right? So they didn't. I don't think the Fire Water World were as good as Earthworld was.
I have no idea if that's a strong statement because I've actually never played any of the world games. But also, I'm wondering, were there any sort of classic design documents or any records of the original Air World that were able to be recovered?
Nothing official. I mean, we went off what Todd Fry had said in interviews to start with, anyway. But once I had the game up and running and basically working from beginning to end, Todd actually came to our studio and took a look at the game, and he gave us our blessing. He gave us his blessing. So that was one thing we wanted to make sure happened, because it was his original his IP, basically that he came up with, and he was going to create Airworld, and he had a vision for that. We didn't match that exactly, but we wanted to make sure that he liked what we had.
I mean, different people are going to do things differently, so that's not a big surprise. But can you tell us where you deviated from that vision?
Yeah, his vision. There were a couple key areas. First of all, his vision with the hexagrams in the game was to have a sort of 3D kind of navigation system, where and on the 2600, that's it's not really 3D, but he wanted to be able to zoom into the hexagrams, and then the hexagrams, there would be a different mini game for every hexagram, and there's 64 of them. So a very ambitious plan he had. And looking through, doing my research into the I Ching, it just and considering how much time we had very little time to finish it. There really wasn't enough time for us to create 64 unique mini games. So we sort of simplified things a bit. I wanted to keep the navigation similar to Earthworld, and the grid, the 8x8 grid, just made a lot of sense for so many different reasons. So that's really where we veered from Todd's vision. In the end, there are 4 different types of mini games, but there are also 4 different difficulties in 3 of those. So there's plenty of variety, and I really wanted to focus on making the mini games fun and enjoyable and not frustrating like they were in the original games.
That's understandable, because the sword quest games unfortunately do not have the best reputation of Atari's releases. I've certainly been hearing for years, maybe decades, that these sword quest games were not good.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that, because if you try, if you play the mini games, they can be very frustrating.
It's not just that, but they were very elaborate for their day and age.
Yeah, another big difference, obviously, is we don't have a comic.
Right, right.
So that's another reason that we approached things the way that we did. We knew we weren't going to have a comic, so we had, but we wanted a narrative, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to create a narrative, after doing research into the I Ching and how it worked, it was pretty amazing that it just fits so well, because every hexagram has a meaning, and we could build a story by inserting clues into those hexagrams and their meanings, and sort of bring everything together. So we found the hexagrams, different hexagrams that meant certain things, and then we would create a riddle around that, right? And then we built all of that information into the manual for the game. So even though we didn't have a comic, we tried to approach a similar experience where you had to, actually open the manual and reference the manual to solve all the riddles.
Yeah, that is definitely keeping in the spirit of the Sword Quest games, and I guess Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But anyway, so were there any places that you broke from the mold? Not just the vision, but like the Atari 2600 mold for, like, say, quality of life improvements?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you play Air World, you'll see that there's a couple different modes. In the pause menu, you can turn on a smooth mode, and I'm drawing more sprites there in a line than you can actually than the 2600 could handle without it flickering all over the place.
Right.
I didn't want that flick. I mean, we could have simulated the flicker, because this is not a 2600 game running on 26. It's not an emulated game.
Right.
So I could have added the flicker, no problem, but it was just ugly, and I didn't feel like we needed to. It's a reimagined Sword Quest Air World game.
Yeah.
Let's like not add that flicker and possibly drive people crazy. So yeah, we broke some rules, we bent some rules here and there, when it comes to how things move, and how many images or how many sprites are on a single line. So yeah.
I don't mind that kind of stuff being broken, because I remember the flicker of the NES and the Atari 2600, and even back in the day, I hated it. I thought it looked terrible.
Me too.
And I'm like, and I was like, I remember thinking, like, I was looking forward to the day where games didn't have this.
Yeah,
it's right. Like,
it's a clever way of working beyond the technical limitations of the system you're working for. But if you're not working for a system that has those limitations, it's not something that's worth keeping.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, some things are.
Like, unless you're really, really into the nostalgia. That's why Mega Man 9 has the flicker option. Because, Mega Man games flickered a lot. Like, that is the reason. But otherwise, it can go. Like leave the bad parts of the past in the past, quite frankly.
There's a distinction to be made between the designer's intent and what they had to deal with, and the flicker is an example of something that they had to cope with. Like, that is not something they would have wanted in there if they could have gotten rid of it. So we're hopefully satisfying the intent of the original 2600 aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the question in this area is, what's been the reception from the player base towards these new titles? Like, like Sword Quest fans, are they happy with this Air World game?
I mean, from my perspective, that was one of the games where, people were happy. It's kind of games like people are happy that we've taken the time to conclude it, right? That Atari is willing to do that after all these years. So there's like a sense of closure to it. So I think the reception in regards to Airworld is that, decades and decades later, there's finally a closure to this, long-standing missing game. So that's, I think, where a lot of the kind of feedback comes from. But I think in general, the reimagined games were kind of that nice surprise that people, talk about a lot in relation to Atari 50, because it was something that wasn't expected and normally does not happen in releases like this. We hadn't talked about them a lot. Even in all the trailers and stuff, there are very little glimpses of these new games. So we wanted it to be a surprise for people. And we wanted them to, like, not only fall in love with sort of like the base content that we had in the celebration, but also to say, like, look, we even went above and beyond the Call of Duty and delivered new experiences, which are in the same kind of lines as the Recharge games that fans of Atari have already been seeing throughout the year. But not only that, but we wanted to kind of create a mixture of them. You know what I mean? Like, we have, Vector Sector, which is this sort, the vector-based game. There's a pseudo sequel to Haunted House that Dave did, Haunted Houses. There's the conclusion of the Sword Quest series. We have Mike who did Yar's Revenge Enhanced, which is basically drawing over the original game and just giving it a fresh coat of paint, right? And then Jason, who loves sort of the paddle kind of base ball and paddle games, creating sort of an homage to Breakout or the best elements of Breakout, right, and things like that. So I think that
Don't forget
diversity-
Quadratank.
and Quadratank, yes, Mike made Quadratank, which is like, yes, there's so many. I
Yeah.
can't which is like everyone, is this sort of mixture of combat and tank, right? That everyone played on the 2600 as far as combat went. And what is the logical progression to that? So I think what was neat about the Atari 50, the new games, and the thing that really resonated and got people excited is the diversity in all. We weren't just happy of creating like, okay, we're just going to take half a dozen games and just like reskin them. We actually went out and made like completely different experiences from each other, which is something that you never, I mean, I hate to toot our own horn, but you never see that because it's crazy. Like, who, not only from a scope perspective of doing Atari V, but actually going off and creating 5 or 6 completely new games that are just drastically different from each other. It's like kind of unheard of. You don't see it, right?
There were people saying that they would pay the full price just to play Vector Sector or just to play Quadratank.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we-
You could
we
have
had-
sold those games individually, right? Like you could have
Yeah.
sold those games individually, and people would have bought them. And that's, I think, also what helps to make the value proposition of Atari 50 so compelling.
In all fairness, that was my mom.
No, that was somebody at the at one of the shows we went to.
No, there's many people who say that. If you look
yeah.
on the, you look across our social,
online,
Atari
yes.
Discord, stuff like that, people are constantly raving about the new games and because it's so unexpected. Like they never expected us to do that, and we did it. So.
Well, I mean, it is an impressive feat, if nothing else. Though, was there any discussion about splitting off any of these games and making it its own individual project?
I mean, not during it. Really, what we wanted, and I think I've sort of talked about this before, is that we really wanted to make sure that the value proposition and the desire for people to buy this game is, unquestionable. Like, you've seen a lot of Atari releases in the past. Even Digital Eclipse has made quite a few of them in the past. So there is no shortage of collections that include Atari games, especially 2600, 5200, and some of the arcade stuff. So we knew going into this that if we really wanted people to invest in another release without having to even think about it, we really had to pack it with quality content and new stuff. And so that's why we felt that having these reimagined games were so important. It was something that you couldn't get anywhere else. And, this is the only place you can get it. And we didn't want to split them up because we didn't want to take the value proposition away from Atari 50. But that's not to say, I know I could probably speak for Jeremy and Dave, where like they probably have a lot of ideas how to further build upon the stuff that they've made. So if Atari ever came back to us and said like, hey, it'd be awesome if we just made a standalone Vector Sector with more stuff. I'm sure Jeremy would jump at that. But
Yep, no problem.
yeah, exactly. Right. He's probably working on it right now. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like we all knew that it was important to include that and the whole timeline museum sort of presentation to differentiate Atari 50 from everything else that's come before it. So we felt it was important to keep it all together.
It's certainly no mean feat, given the amount of Atari collections that have been done over the decades. And I would say you accomplished that goal.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I will often say is that a lot of these collections, celebration sort of releases tend to rely purely on nostalgia, and nostalgia will get you to a certain point. There's no doubt, but nostalgia will not expand your fan base of people who are interested in stuff. it only continues to shrink. And so with Atari 50, we, from the get-go knew that we had to try to appeal to a larger audience than just pure Atari fans. And that was our goal, from day one onward. And that's why it makes me feel so happy when people, there was a tweet the other day. This guy who's like 19 years old, is like, never grew up with Atari 2600, Atari or anything, never had any of the consoles, but really want to learn about this era of games, and so I bought this, right? And yes, that is the goal, right? Like you don't want to rely on the laurels that every Atari fan is just going to buy Atari 50, but a good number of them are because they are Atari fans. And you want to deliver on that, and you want to make them, proud of it. But you also want to design a product that has enough new content and also context around it that people who are not necessarily familiar with the IP or the content can still be interested in it and want to buy it, to learn about it. And that's probably what I view is our biggest accomplishment in relation to Atari 50.
Very noble. And I suppose, what's next, if anything, for Atari 50?
I mean, nothing really that we can talk about. We're always talking with Atari. Obviously, Atari 50 has been a huge success for our development team and also Atari as a company. And I think that we always look for opportunities to build upon what we have, just like Cowabunga Collection and things like that. But you have to have the dominoes in place, and everything has to be in the right order for things to work out. And part of the challenge, I think, is that just organically, growth wise, we're working on so many more projects this year than we did last year, like considerably more, as Jeremy and Dave can attest to. So that the time constraints are always something, especially this year, that are really difficult to juggle. So even if we wanted to, and a good opportunity arose to like build upon Atari 50 or do something to add to that, we probably have to kind of work hard to squeeze it in between all these other projects that we're working on currently. So the desire is definitely there, but I think at this point it would have to be the right thing to do at the right time. So we're kind of just waiting for that.
Well, hopefully that opportunity does arise at some point. Because, as much as has been done with Atari 50 so far, certainly more can always be done.
Oh, yeah. There's so much more to Atari's history. We've just kind of touched the surface of it, and tried to call out the highlights of it. But even even the research that we've done and the materials that we have, like what is in Atari 50 is sort of just scratching the surface in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly seen, why wasn't, say, Red Baron included in this game, or package, or, insert game here. And, the reasons are usually licensing, but it might just be you weren't able to get to it.
Yeah, and that's part of it too. I mean, obviously this is a curated, our celebration is a very curated list of games. And so there are still other games that we could have included that we didn't, just because we wanted to have the number of games a bit more manageable, and we wanted every game to feel a bit important. Because when you throw 200, 300 games in a collection, they start to lose a bit of their importance just because there's so many of them. So we were very conscious of that and tried to rein that in as much as possible. But there's no doubt that there is still a large number of games that Atari has the rights to, that we could eventually include in the future if there was a reason to.
Indeed. And like I said, hopefully those see the light of day.
Yeah, who knows? Knock on wood. Well, who knows what the future will hold. So,
indeed. So, is there anything else that you all can talk about at this stage?
No, it's a bit tough because we haven't announced anything new. Dave and Jeremy are especially working on multiple things that are, will be big releases for us hopefully this year. But I think all I can say is, thanks for everyone's support last year. we released just 3 main products, which were the Cowabunga Collection, the Atari 50, and then the Garbage Pail Kids release. This year, there is way more releases. If everything comes out as planned, way more releases from Digital Clips. It's our largest number of releases in a year in a long time. So hopefully people are excited about that. And they're going to be a mixture of stuff. They're going to be a mixture of things like you saw in Atari 50, where there's sort of what we call this, interactive documentary kind of situation. There's going to be original games that we're working on that we're building out that are new experiences. And then there's going to be more traditional collection stuff like, Cowabunga Collection is an example of. So we're going to have a mixture of a bunch of different experiences, and hopefully our audience will really appreciate all the new content and hopefully a few surprises along the way. But yeah, 2023 is going to be definitely a big year for us, so stay tuned for future announcements.
Okay. Well, we are certainly looking forward to that, and maybe we'll have you all back on the program when those projects are ready to be talked about.
Oh yeah,
Well,
sounds good. Reach out to us.
We will. But in the meantime, you can pick up the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection and the Atari 50 collection on pretty much any platform that's active right now. So be sure to do that today.
Yep, and there have actually been recent sales, especially I think Atari 50 has had a sale going on where I think it's $10 or $15 cheaper than what it normally is. So if you have an interest in that one especially, I think now is probably the best time to grab it because there is a sale going on.
Duly noted. All right, Betty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion for the week. So this week we are jumping into the accessibility debates. I'm trying to remember, I think we've talked about this before. It has to have come up. It's been a while. Because there's been a new wrinkle, I suppose,
air quotes,
in said
new
debate. I think I want to say the last time we might have explored it, or I remember the last time I heard the accessibility debate come up was in regards to adding difficulty levels to Elden Ring, and indeed all of the Soulsborns, and just all of the fucking yelling about how this will ruin the game and that's not what the designers intended and yada yada yada. And it's probably a bit late for those, to say the least. I mean, I would relish a pause button. I know why they're not. I know why a pause button is not in those games. But motherfucker, sometimes I have to go and do shit.
I mean, especially give us an option for an offline mode and give us a fucking pause button. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's like, look, sometimes people knock at the door, or the nature calls. It's like there's a reason why the pause button's been pretty standard since the Atari 5200. First console with a pause button, by the way. But this is in regards to Final Fantasy 16, because they're going in a more gameplay focused direction. As in, it's not just a matter of selecting, easy mode, or what Psychonauts 2 did. For those who don't know, Psychonauts 2 has an invincibility mode, where you just can't die, you don't fall. I'm like, I don't know how.
Which difficulty is only one kind of accessibility issue anyway.
Yeah.
But yes, I believe the line here is that because people feel bad or are reluctant to, for lack of feeling bad, actually select an easy mode. Instead, they're going to make a selection of accessories available that effectively make you auto succeed at certain, like auto succeed at defense, or I know one of them is you automatically dodge attacks.
Well, it's something deeper. It's something a lot deeper than that. Because how do I put this? One of the central tenets of core gaming, let's say, has been overcoming difficulty. That's been that's one of the things that people talk about in the old days. How much more difficult games were in insert generation here. Like games have been getting easier all the fucking time.
Back in my day, go fuck yourself, Grandpa.
And there's definitely some truth to that. There's definitely games have been getting easier for one reason or another. But
one of the reasons is because they can make games longer, so they don't need to be super hard in order for people to get any playtime out of them.
Unless they're going in that direction.
I know. Well, no, but now it's voluntary.
Well, let me finish where I'm going with this, because I think this kind of design and mentality really hit its apotheosis in the early 2000s. When we had games like Devil May Cry coming out, and like Ninja Gaiden 2, like those really stick out in mind, like the Ninja Dog mode.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and I want to say like Devil May Cry might have done this as well. These really hard games that would flat out insult you for not being able to beat them or play them.
I know a lot of games, especially in that era, you couldn't get the best ending if you didn't play on the hardest difficulty.
Yeah, and that has its roots. Like I remember there were Sega Genesis games like Rocket Knight Adventures. If you played on easy, you could only play like 3 stages.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. The point is, like, it was a part of gamer culture. Like ingrained in the games themselves to beat, overcome the challenge and the adversity and, I don't know, get the gamer cred that is apparently there.
Asterisk, this was before games had online achievements and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So outside of taking a Polaroid picture of the victory screen, you really had no way to prove you did it.
And people did do this and sent them into magazines and stuff.
Yep.
It's also, it wasn't just a point of pride. It's preying on the insecurities. Mm-hmm. Like I said, Ninja Dog mode just reeks of the 2004. Like, on the other flip side, the reverse started to occur, I'd say, about in the Wii era. That's about the first time I can think of when Nintendo started adding, the helper. Like the white Donkey Kong in Donkey Kong Country Return.
I don't remember the white Donkey Kong, but that's probably because I'm thinking of New Funky Mode. But I do remember the white Tanuki suit / whatever in some of the Mario games around that time.
Also coupled with the really, really, really hand-holdy videos on how to play.
Well, and also that was at the point where it was New Super Mario World, which I know is Wii U, or New Super Mario 3D, whichever one it was.
Mario Galaxy 2 had this.
Well, but I was thinking there's one of them I distinctly remember where like the entire quote unquote main game, like all of the numbered worlds are incredibly simple and easy. But then like they ramp up the difficulty in post game because they want the game to be easy to finish. But the result of that is that if you're reasonably skilled at games, it kind of feels a little like the game doesn't start until after you've already beaten the actual game.
Right. And as we've mentioned, difficulty is just one metric. To bring back Curse of the Moon 2 here, that has a variable selection of difficulty. Like right now, I'm playing on veteran mode, which is what they call retro difficult, though not as difficult as hard mode. But there's also
I believe the difficulties on that one are like the way that modern is with like reasonably friendly physics and no live system. A system with the medium difficulty has like a live system and knockback, but is not completely terrible. And then like the hardest mode is enjoy your Castlevania jumps.
That's in veteran mode as well.
Okay.
Well, they have the knockback thing.
Yeah, but knockback is
and it's got the rigidness. I've played this game for 4 hours so far.
Okay, I couldn't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
I just know that I know that easy difficulty turns off the Castlevania jumps.
Yeah. But right. Getting back to accessibility in general, we're seeing other kinds of accessibility being added into modern games, even up to and including the AAA sets. Subtitles.
Subtitles also. Subtitles that don't suck if you're lucky. Meaning appropriate sizes and appropriate degree of opacity versus transparency over various colors of backgrounds.
Or even not just text, like people speaking, but like say there's an important noise going on that you need to know about. That if you were actually hard of hearing, you would not be able to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And colorblind mode. Especially important for puzzle games because you do need to distinguish blocks in like puzzle games. But not but like The Last of Us 2 had some colorblind options that I'm blanking on.
Last of Us 2 had color?
The Last of Us actually
I'm joking.
No, but it does have like a color mode where it highlights things. If I remember correctly. Like the Last of Us 2 has a lot of accessibility options.
Well, I know it does. And actually, I suppose it would be kind of important for the semi-standard AAA action game thing of interactable shit is yellow. Would be important to have an option for people who can't distinguish yellow very well.
Yeah. And there's also things like the Microsoft Accessibility Controller, or people who have physical disabilities.
Yeah, that's a big one. Is that there are some games that it's very difficult to make play well with people with lower than standard manual dexterity.
Kind of like because of my legs, I can never really play games like DDR because legs don't work too good.
I mean, technically, you could just plug in a regular controller and do it with your thumbs, but where's the fun in that?
It depends, because like arcade cabinets, I can't exactly do that with.
Yeah.
Well, to tie this back into Final Fantasy 16, like the producer on the game, I believe, mentioned one of the reasons why he's doing this is because he's 50 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And
UQP's an old motherfucker.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like his body doesn't move as good as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely a concern I can certainly appreciate more, since I am X the amount of years old myself. And, you know, I'm now suffering from a diabetic condition, and I've probably got peripheral neuropathy in not just my feet, but my hands. It's like, it's definitely the kind of thing I think about more these days.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, I can still play video games reasonably well.
But yeah, and that's another thing, is a lot of people will think of, oh, you're just talking about playing video games. That doesn't require a whole lot of physical stuff, but there is a lot of manual dexterity involved and hand-eye coordination and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, and to tell you, like, if your ability to play video games goes, like, your ability to drive might be going. Because that's another activity that requires a lot of dexterity and hand-eye coordination, all of that jazz.
Yeah, a lot more than people think.
You can attest.
Yeah.
And I certainly worry about, like, the day I'm not able to play video games anymore. It's actually something that worries me at night. Probably because I host a video game show.
Indeed.
And
if I have to hire someone to be your hands.
Hopefully my hands aren't ever that bad.
Yeah.
But and I'm sure it's the kind of thing that the rest of the crew on MSP, probably except for Kevin, because he seems to be physically healthy at least. But you want to talk about falling apart, Mac.
I'm not sure we're totally Mac together at this point.
Bubblegum and hope.
And we're fresh out of hope.
Yeah. And even, departed member Kira has a lot of body problems. Not talking about gender dysphoria or anything like that. I mean, like, her shoulder is pretty bad.
Yeah, didn't she also have a back injury that she was dealing with?
I believe so, and talking about fine motor skills and that kind of thing. And like, I do remember she mentioned that she wears a shoulder brace for gaming.
Yup.
So, it's not just we're aging, but we have chronic conditions, or we got injured and they have developed into chronic conditions and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So accessibility is on our minds as well.
Which is why ableist fuckers can go basically fuck themselves.
Yeah, I approve of the attempt of trying to make mechanics more user-friendly, but this particular way of doing it that they're doing for Final Fantasy 16 is a little bit weird.
Well, I think it's more just you don't have to turn it on if you don't need it.
That's true. They did also say there are 4 of the things, but you can only equip 2 at once because you only have 2 extra slots. And the reason is because if you equipped all of them, you wouldn't have to actually do anything, which I think would kind of be fine. Even though I know some people are enraged by the idea of being able to fully experience a game without, quote-unquote, doing anything.
Yeah, again, those people can go fuck themselves.
Yeah. Anyway, we are reaching the limits of our time, so we should wrap this up.
Indeed.
But yeah, and indeed, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. So coming up on the week ahead, no Friday show this week. And on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Donut Dodo, 4th Generation Warfare, Ray Zone, and The Legend of Gwen. So, yeah. And also, we do have a new episode of Moonhawk Studios Presents happening soon. So we should go and begin the process of starting that. So until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.